Hello, hello. Hey up, what's up, what's good, bonjour. Welcome to the Any Given Runway show. I'm your host, Randall Carlton Brown. Any Given Runway celebrates the exploration of new cultures by highlighting some of the most artistic, athletic, tenacious, basically unique and interesting people in the world. Everyone has a story, each person a scholar. Welcome to Season 6. No lengthy preamble. Let's get right to it. We have a great episode for you today with a talented and creative guest. Author of the Nick Bracco series, Gary Ponzo, joins the show. One of the absolute great joys of life is finding a new book that you enjoy. That excitement is exacerbated when you learn that the author has several other books that you haven't yet read, and maybe even a series. And that was the case for me this summer. It was a case of landing all sevens on the fruit machine, and I discovered a new fun series written by Arizona author Gary Ponzo. Gary began his writing career focusing on short stories and was featured in numerous publications, including Amazing Journeys magazine and Potpourri. Two of his stories were nominated for the very prestigious Pushcart Prize. His first novel, A Touch of Deceit, won the Southwest Writers' Novel Contest. Gary's Nick Bracco series has sold over 100,000 copies worldwide. A Touch of Deceit was first written in 2010. FBI agent Nick Bracco can't stop a Kurdish terrorist from firing missiles at random across homes across the country. And the police can't stand watch over every household. So Bracco recruits his cousin Tommy to help track down the terrorists. Bracco's cousin Tommy is in the mafia. Oh yeah, it gets messy fast. The FBI and the mafia may be an unlikely partnership, but does create for a whirlwind of adventure. And A Touch of Deceit has been one of my favorite books of the year. What makes this story even more significant is that growing up, Gary had direct experiences with the mafia. And on today's episode, Gary shares some of those stories and discusses how he used those events to capture the idiosyncratic details of those in the mob. Gary and I also chat about deadlines and what it's like to be a support writer or ghostwriter on a project. Really fun episode. Glad I picked up A Touch of Deceit. Glad I met Gary. And even more thrilled to have him on the show today. You're going to love him. So let's go ahead and bring on author Gary Ponzo. And let's learn. Hello, Gary.
Hey, Randall, how you doing?
Wonderful. Great to meet you. Great to finally link up.
Yeah. Nice to meet you too.
I know we're going to have a great time. I'll jump right into the questions. The Nick Bracco series. It's the FBI, the mafia, together at last. Tell me about the series and what makes you the most proud.
Well, listen, some of the aspects of the series, first of all, when I first published book number one, it was really just going to be a standalone book. I didn't really think about making it a series because I felt like I've had a certain arc. It ended at a point where it was a, finished product. And then the response that I received from the readers were amazing. Like, I kept on getting emails from people, when's the next one coming out? When's the series, blah, blah, blah. Never dawned on me to have a next book in the series. So the response was big. And I got early on, I got some pretty heady people, Stephen Carpenter, who was the showrunner and the producer and writer for the Grimm series on NBC, contacted me, said, "Hey, love this book. If you ever need a blurb or anything, that kind of stuff." I don't know. I just got a lot of good responses from it. So that's probably the one thing that, and this was not the initial birthplace of this came from, I don't know if you remember, Whitey Bulger in Boston was a mob guy who worked with John Connolly, was an FBI agent in Boston at the time. And really, Bulger ran his operations with impunity because the FBI was supporting him. And so, and they've made movies and books about it and so forth. But so the idea of the FBI and the mob working together really came from that concept.
You mentioned that it initially started as a standalone book. with a book series now that's gone over a decade, balancing new ideas with existing themes, it's got to be challenging. So, how do you ensure that each new addition to the series is something entertaining for the readers?
You know, you have to um, first of all, the characters are real life characters, okay? And they act like real life characters would act. And I try not to mind old tropes like you suggested, and everything has to be fresh. I'm very, very allergic to, using any kind of situation that I've used in the past. I don't ever want readers to look at something and go, oh, he did this in book three or he did this in book five. No, it's always got to be something there. But by the same token, I'll leave you I'll leave you with a few breadcrumbs along the way so that you can follow where I might be going. Um, but the characters have to breathe and speak with like normal people would speak, I mean, and I picked up a lot of this just from reading a lot of Elmore Leonard and a lot of real just Dennis Lehane. A lot of people, when you uh, read a book and somebody is talking and then they stop and they cough or that like they act and talk like real humans. You know what I mean? You read so many books, not so many, but you'll read a book and they have perfect dialect. They have perfect language. They use perfect English to speak. And the characters that I'm dealing with, they aren't exactly speaking very they're not speaking English very well sometimes. They'll take liberties with the language. So I'll make sure that I have these characters using the dialogue and the language and the narrative that they would be using. And that's the key, I think, to any good writing is making sure that these characters are plausible and are doing and saying things that are interesting, provocative, but real.
You mentioned wanting to stay fresh. Mafia story is incredibly popular, and there's so many familiar tropes out there. We all know them by heart. So, when you first started, what misconceptions of that world did you want to avoid? And were there any ideas that were complete non-starters?
Not really. I mean, I'm pretty open. I'm very open-minded to any concept that may float in my brain. Um, so, this, okay, so this goes back to my dad owned a candy store in Brooklyn in the 70s. Okay. And so my dad was Sicilian, makes me Sicilian. I was working, I look at back at it now. My dad would uh, stay there for the week. We lived on Long Island, like an hour away. He would stay there for the week. There was a little apartment in the back. And then I meet him on Friday afternoon. I was 16 years old. And I'd meet him at a gas station halfway at a certain point. This is before cell phones, before any of this. He'd give me the keys to the store. I'd go to the city. I'd work the candy store by myself with my German Shepherd dog, Susie. And we would, I'd work the store by myself on weekend. But the mafia would run the numbers out of my dad's candy store. And my dad allowed it. And in return, they would protect me. Okay. So, it's, I have a different perspective of these guys than a normal person would. I was Sicilian. I was a golden child. They were going to protect me. There was a bar across the street called Young's Tavern where all the mafia types would hang out. Okay. And there was a big glass window there, and they'd all get hammered all night. And they could see me across the street because we had a glass window too. And they could see me behind the counter working. Okay. And so they always protected me. If there was anything fishy going on, one night, I'll give you an example of this. One night, that we used to have a Dryer's ice cream sign in the window of our store. And I was told, if you're ever in trouble, get over there and turn that Dryer's ice cream sign off. That was it. That was the only signal needed. Okay. So right at about 11 o'clock one night, some guy comes into the counter and asked for a Coke. Now, back then, if you want a Coke, okay, you had two squirts of Coke, two squirts of Coke syrup, and then seltzer water, and you mix it up, And that's a Coke. You want a cherry Coke? It's one squirt of Coke syrup, one squirt of cherry syrup, seltzer water. That's your cherry Coke. So a guy comes in right at 11, like I'm about to close. It's like 3 minutes to 11. A teenage guy comes in, sits down, starts saying, "Hey, you have another employee working?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's in the back." I'm even 16. I'm smart enough to know that, I don't want to pretend like I'm alone. And he starts asking me questions about how much money we make in a day, just some real rudimentary things that even a 16-year-old Gary Ponzo would know that this is not good. And I forget how it escalated, but now it's like 5 after 11. I'm supposed to be closed. This guy's still there. Um, I was like, this is not good. So I went over and turned the dryer. First and only time I ever did this, I turned the dryer sign off, and literally 2 minutes later, door opens. Three heavy set, burly guys come walking in with white shirts, open down to their just hammered out of their mind. Stand around this kid, okay, and just like really breathing on him. One guy picks up his Coke and starts drinking it, okay, and never looked at me. And they literally looked at this kid and say, "You know what? You don't ever want to be in this neighborhood ever again." Okay, that's all they said. That's all the guy said. "You don't ever want to be in this neighborhood ever again." Didn't ask what he was doing, didn't ask any questions. He just said, "Don't ever come in this neighborhood again." But then the kid's eyes are like this. He runs out. He runs out the door. Never, the guys never even looked at me. And as they're walking out, the last guy looks at me and says, "Hey, kid, turn the light back on." That was it. That was the end of it. And I've got, I could bore you with hours worth of stuff, but that was the kind of atmosphere I had. But these guys that I knew, okay, and I realize I'm, portraying this, pie in the sky hyperbole, but these guys would come in. One guy, Max, who wore a wool jacket, whether it was January or June, and he took the numbers. And the numbers are back then. The numbers you pick three numbers, paid 500 to one. This is before the lottery, and those three numbers would be printed the next day in the newspaper as the handle, the amount money bet on the local horse track, whether it was Aqueduct or Belmont. And so people would give Max every day. You come in there, people would give Max $1, $5, whatever, and then knowing that it paid 500 to one, right? And they'd give him their three numbers. And some people had the same three number every day: 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 1, whatever. And we had three phone booths in this little candy store. And then Max would go in there and call the numbers into whoever, never wrote anything down. Okay. Because that was the thing back then. If you had a slip of paper with three numbers and a name, the cops could get you for running the numbers, right? So I remember one time Max had been there all day. People had given him numbers and giving him money, $5, $10, whatever. And he's just shoving it in his pocket, not saying a thing. They just say, "Hey, Max, 865, give him a $10 bill." Puts it in his pocket, never said. So finally I asked Max one time, I said, and the sweetest guy to me, obviously. And I said, "Max, um, how do you remember all these numbers? I mean, these people are giving you numbers all day long. How do you remember those things?" And he looks at me and he goes, "You think they're going to cheat me?" "You think they're going to come in here and tell me they hit it when they didn't?" I go, "Yeah, you're right. I guess that's not something they're going to do, is it?" So, but these guys were personable to me. And again, I realized who it was. They were personable. They would just talk sports. They would talk family. They would talk homework. They would talk all kinds of subjects with me. I never saw a gun. I never saw any of the stuff that they would be doing, obviously, that, highly illegal or whatever. But I saw these people as just regular guys, I mean, one guy would come in there. I forget his name, but he would come in there all the time, and he would sit there and chat sports. He loved sports. His kid were in sports, and he would run. And if he saw a woman coming up the stairs to get into the can, he'd run over there and open the door for her. And the woman's leaving, he'd go up and open the door. He'd help her with her package. He'd help. I mean, so I saw the glamour part of it. I didn't see, the nastiness of it. But for me, I thought these guys deserve a representation of loyalty in their life. Family and loyalty was their big thing. But I didn't want to. I don't. I try not to glamorize it in my books like these guys are noble human beings. Obviously, there are things that they do that are not very noble. But I try to breathe life into what I saw when I was growing up.
Knowing that you came from that background was one thing that I enjoyed while I was reading the book because it made me think of, oh, he's heard this lingo. He didn't just create this out of thin air. He's lived it, he's experienced it. But there's another aspect that you wrote about that you didn't experience and you had to do the research on your own. And I'm curious, how do you go about writing about terrorism, learning about things like Semtex without finding yourself being flagged at the local library and being on the do not fly list or something because of these things? How do you get that accurate research?
Well, Google helps a little bit, obviously. You can Google some things and learn some things that way. But I'm a big proponent of, like, if I want to stuff, like on one of my books, there was some mercenaries, some soldiers of fortune, so to speak, that were doing contract work for the government. Okay. And so I read an entire book called Blackwater about Eric Prince and how he runs these mercenaries and so I'll do a lot of reading. I'll read a book or two about a certain subject, and I'm not going to bore my readers with how much I learned. I'm not going to sit there and platform things out that I learned that. So I'll read an entire book about Blackwater mercenary soldiers, and I might use one or two lines to, use a plausible fact that I know for a fact happened. But so I'll read books. I will talk with now. Every FBI branch, every FBI office have a liaison. They actually have an FBI agent who deals with the media. He's an FBI agent, but his job is to deal with media folks. Okay, and so you can call up and ask for the FBI media agent, and he'll call you back, and you can talk to him, and you can ask him questions, which I did and have. And you can ask, I remember when before I even wrote the book, the first one, do they have partners? What kind of guns can they use? Can they use their own kind of guns? Can they buy their own gun? What kind of guns can they use? And the guy was very forthright and was very honest with everything that he said. And, and I remember one time I was approaching some subjects and I said to him, I said, look, if you, are a little reticent to give me some details on things, feel free to hold back. And the guy, this is on the phone, and I could hear the guy, chuckling to himself, and he goes, "Don't worry, Mr. Ponzo, I will not be giving you any top secret information over the
Yeah, yeah,
phone."
yeah,
Like, you stupid idiot, what are you
yeah.
talking about? But the information he was giving me was stuff, obviously, that has been appropriated to him to offer to media types because he gets new broadcast journalists all the time asking him questions about certain subjects, and he's allowed to give you that information. So that was a big asset. And I'll talk to specialists. I talked to there was a guy in England who was a nuclear physicist because in one of my books there's actually a nuclear bomb threat in America, and I spoke with a nuclear physicist for a good hour. And the guy, I mean, I detailed so many things about, fusion and plutonium and uranium and how they work and how they work together. And at one point, I asked him if this pancake, this uranium pancake, if you fired a gun at it, okay, would it detonate? And he said to me, he said, I don't know. And he said it could. There could be enough energy to detonate that, or it could not. And there were things that he said. So I was able to use that. And that's where I get a lot of my research is firsthand stuff is big, reading books, but really interviewing people and you'd be surprised at how many of these specialists are more than willing to talk to you, knowing what you're doing, obviously, They know I'm not a terrorist. They can Google me and see that the books that I'm writing, they know what I'm asking for. So that's where I get a lot of it. That's where I'll get a lot of that information. And you know, it has to be plausible, obviously, um, but it can't be it has to be believable but plausible. And there's a difference, and I'll tell you what it is. I read an article one time about, and if you read the first book, I think it's in there, where a person was shot with a 22 caliber gun. Okay, the bullet went into their head, went ricocheted off their scalp, ricocheted off their skull, and stayed inside the scalp and then came out the back. This is absolutely true. Okay, read about it. I think it was Time Magazine or something. I read about this. This person was unharmed. I mean, had some topical stuff. So I did that in my first book where I had Nick Bracco's wife shot close range with a 22. The bullet goes in here, goes all the way around the back. Of course, everyone thinks she's dead, but she's not. Okay. And I can't tell you the comments I got from my readers, like, I love the book, blah, blah, blah. But if somebody gets hit with a 22, they're going to die, at close range, And what am I going to do? So just because it's factual doesn't mean it's plausible. You see what I'm saying? It has to be within the realm of plausibility. Even if it's fact, it doesn't matter. The person has to really believe that it could happen.
Another thing that I enjoyed about first book is that it's very evergreen, and especially when it comes to news stories. One character remarks that terrorism that was ongoing is going to lead to the scrutiny of anyone with an accent. And then another character is complaining about the bureaucracy that limits how we can dispose of criminals, how we can fight terrorism. What's it like to know that you created something, you created a story that is still culturally relevant a decade later?
Yeah, look, we all have prejudices, right? And my job, I feel like as an author, is to breathe life into these characters, whether and they're all many of them are flawed, and we all have our own prejudices. So when you get a character who thinks a certain way about an Arab person, and I remember one of the comments, and we all live through these situations. If you're old enough to remember, when the Gulf War and 9/11, all these things, um, that when you had people coming on TV speaking with an Arab accent or a Middle Eastern accent, okay, maybe conversing about what their thoughts are. I had one of my characters say, well, I was talking to this guy, and you can tell he was lying just by his accent. Okay. Meaning he had a Middle Eastern accent, he must have been lying, right? So these are the prejudices that we all have, right? I mean, I have them, you have them, we all have our own prejudices. So that's all part of breathing life into these characters, okay? Being real with this stuff and letting people know that these are how some people feel, right? And in today's society, there's no doubt there's 50% of people feel this way and 50% of this. And that's the other thing about the book, the series that I started, whatever, 15, 20 years ago. There was absolutely no politics. And I made it a point in my books. You never know if Nick Bracco is a liberal or conservative. You never know who the president, even when I have the president of the United States, you don't know which denomination or which party affiliate he's with. It's all about good guys, bad guys, right, wrong, and the gray area in between. Okay. So I never wanted to ever, disassociate somebody because I'm trying to make a point politically. There is no politics in my books whatsoever. I don't even want that creeping in. It's just about, bad guys, good guys, and the dilemma that we put some of these characters in.
Another book of yours that I was fortunate to read this summer, The Sun's Revenge, a book you wrote as a ghostwriter with, I guess ghostwriter is kind of the term, but assisted with Eddie Johnson, my guy Eddie Johnson, who I first met at the ASU basketball camp in the 90s, back when three-point shooting wasn't a big thing. I remember he hit 13 threes in a row. It was like the highlight of my summer camp. What's it like to work with someone who's not a writer and you're helping them for the first time, I kind of feel like it's probably something like being a parent. You want them to have their own voice. You want them to be able to make mistakes, maybe be free, but you also want to guide them to make sure everything is in route and it's a book. So what's that process like?
Well, okay, so Eddie and I go back about 10 years. We've been 10, 12 years. We became golfing buddies. Okay. And so we to this day I play golf with him once or twice a week. We go on golf trips together. And about I don't know, a couple of 3 years ago, he said, "Look, I have this idea for a book." And at the time, I was like, "You know what? I got my own things going on, Eddie. And it's all good." And I kind of put it off without putting it off, kind of thing. But when I started to think about it, first of all, he's a good friend of mine. He needs help. He couldn't do it on his own. I know that. And B, um, it's not a terrible idea to have to be associated with a celebrity when it comes to sales on a book. So I said, let's. He said, let's have lunch. Let's talk about it. I said, fine. So we sat down, and when I sat down with him, he had 40 or 50 pages. Literally, he brought in 40 or 50 handwritten pages of just plot lines of thoughts and scribbles, like, this happens, that happens. And so when I saw that kind of commitment that he had to the project, I thought, okay, this wasn't just some pie in the sky. Hey, I have an idea. A guy robs a bank and gets caught or whatever nonsense. So I thought, okay, there's something here. And so I I did a lot of the heavy lifting writing wise. Okay, that's my forte. And apparently, this came to him in a dream. All right, literally dreamed this idea. Okay, and so I took what he gave me. I took the notes that he gave me. I took the ideas. I would look at it this way. He's the architect. He gave me the blueprint of what he wanted to happen, and I was the contractor. I did the plumbing, I did the electrical, I did the foundation. I mean, I was in the trenches every day writing the story, and then we'd get together, we'd play around the golf, and I'd say, "Look, what do you want to do with this character? I want to make this character more empathetic, you know." And he'd say, "Well, what if he beats her?" That was one of his comments in the thing. When I was talking to him. He goes, "Well, what if she's being beaten by her boyfriend?" And so he would give me these ideas, and I would go write it out. And then I would send him the chapter or two, and he'd give me a comment of what he liked, what he didn't like. But this is his story. This is his story, and I was just sort of in the trenches writing it. But this story doesn't exist without him giving the idea of what to do. And coincidentally, as a matter of fact, yesterday, we were on the phone with a writer producer, an Emmy winning writer producer from Chicago. And she's interested, she's going to go to her agents and interested in to making it into a series. So for the screen. So all that wouldn't happen without my affiliation with Eddie. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. I get something out of it, he gets something out of it. But in his world, I think he's very happy with the finished product, and we've gotten a lot of great reviews, and a lot of people are enjoying it. So that's how that collaboration happened.
When you're out on the course with Eddie, does he talk more about book ideas or does he complain more about the Chicago Cubs?
Cubs. We'll be in the cart, and he'll have the Cubs game on his phone. I'm telling you, if they have a day game, he's got the Cubs game on his phone. Absolutely, it's Cubs. I mean, we'll talk baseball, we'll talk basketball. It's funny. We don't talk basketball a whole bunch. I mean, I think he's got his own XM radio show that he does for like 2 or 3 hours a day where he gets all that out of his system. So we don't really generally, I don't get in the trenches with him on that. But yes, Cubs, Bears, he'll talk those all day long. And and he talks smack on the course, and we give it to each other pretty hard. And I want to beat his brains in. He wants to beat my brains in, and that's all good. It's all fun and games. But Eddie's a great dude, and it was fun to collaborate with him, and I'm happy the way the project turned out.
He's the only basketball analyst I know who actually has more tweets in the offseason because they're all the baseball Chicago Cubs related. Nonstop about the Cubs. I love it though. I love it. Tell me about a word that might send shivers up your spine a little bit, but I also know that it motivates you. Deadlines. So when you're creating a new deadline for yourself for a project, how firm are these deadlines and what happens if you don't meet them?
Well, life gets in the way sometimes.
Mhm.
But, my process when I'm writing, I try to do a little in the morning. Okay, get up early. I try to do a couple hours in the morning. And then I'll go work out and do other things, play golf, play pickleball, play a lot of pickleball. And then I'll come back in the afternoon, get a couple hours in. But when I set a deadline for myself, I try to stay hard to it, and I try to look at my word count and keep an eye on how much longer I have to get there. But I do have to say this: if I know where I'm going, like about halfway through a book or quarter way through the book, I need to know the ending. Okay, I need to know the ending because if I know the ending, I can give you some head fakes along the way. Okay, and so I need to know where I'm going so that I can get you off path. So that when you get to that ending, and every one of my books, they're going to have a surprise at the end. Every one of them. There's no reason in my mind. That's what a thriller is. Thriller is at the end. It's not a murder mystery. I don't want to bore people with the narrative of, I'm not saying all murder mysteries are like this, but a murder mystery tends to be, you're curious about all these clues. And then the last 5 pages, they tell you everything that's been happening in, the whole book. And it's like, well, that's
Yeah.
very anticlimactic, in my opinion. Okay. But for me, there's always going to be a twist at the end. And that's, just a little twist let you know, oh, geez, I didn't realize, but I'll always leave breadcrumbs for you. I'm not going to let you know at the very last page that, oh, by the way, this whole time we were on Mars or some ridiculous, you know what I mean? But I will let you know that, if you really think about it and you go back and read through the clues, you could have figured it out at the end. So as far as deadline goes, yes, they are self-imposed for me, but I usually almost always beat them. I usually always beat those deadlines and get it. But I will not sacrifice quality to meet a deadline. I won't do it. Like I'll get to a point where there's a crossroads in the story, and if I can't find my way out of this corner, I might not write a word for 3 or 4 days until I figure out how do I get out of this? Because a lot of times I'll paint myself into a corner on purpose, you know, and then then it'll just come to me,
Mhm.
and I'll think it happens all the time. And if you're familiar with the stuff, it happens all the time. And all of a sudden I'll think, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? And then I'll say, well, the guy kills him, and I never dawned on me until all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the guy kills him. And then I think of the ramifications after that. Okay, what happens if he kills him? What are the consequences after that? So they're self-imposed, but I'm not going to. I'll go a week or two over, but I won't sacrifice the quality of it. And then, of course, then I send it to my editor, and the editor will, I'll think I've got a pretty good script. I mean, this is pretty darn good. I'm really happy with it. I've scoured everything, made sure grammatically it's good and that contextually it's good. And then I'll send it to my editor. And no matter what, no matter how good I think it is, I get it sent back and every page is full of red ink.
Yeah.
Every single page. There's not one clean page in a 300-page book, a 250 page. There's not one clean page. Not one. There's always something that he can improve. And 90% of the time, he's right.
My last question is an easy one. Actually, this might be a very difficult question now that I think about it. We talk about tropes when it comes to the mafia. There's one that stands out, and it's the food. So when I finish your next book in the series, I'd like to have some type of mafia inspired dinner to celebrate finishing the book. What is my order and what's the wine pairing?
Well, I'm not a wine aficionado. I'm not going to lie. I'm not. So I got to beg off on that. But as far as the food goes, being from, Italian family, you can't beat spaghetti and meatballs for me. I mean, my mom, when I was growing up, every Sunday was family pasta day, and she had a a gray metal pot on simmering on the stove all day with meat sauce and sausage and meatballs already in there in the sauce. And I'd have my friends come over from the football team or the basketball team or whatever sport was in session at that time. And yeah, I mean, and they all wanted to come. They all wanted to come because it would be spaghetti and meatballs, and it would be Italian bread and salad, and so I'd have to go the traditional spaghetti and meatballs for me.
No arguments here. Just extra on the Italian bread, also extra on that for me. Best of luck and everything. I hope we chat again, but thank you for today.
Thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it, Randall. Thank you for everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. All right. Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you for listening. Much appreciation to Gary. Scoop up A Touch of Deceit, the first book in the Nick Bracco series. And for more information, check out GaryPonzo.com. Everyone has a story. Each person a scholar. Thank you for listening. Fill up that passport. I'll see you on the road. A bientôt.